Section 25 of the National Geographic Magazine, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Proceedings of the International Geographic Conference in Chicago, July 27 to 28, 1893. Memoirs and Addresses. The Caravels of Columbus, by Victor Maria Concas. Invited only a few days ago to take part in this Congress as commander of the Caravels, as well as a member of the Geographical Society of Madrid, I am very sorry that my address cannot be as important as the subject demands. Although I am intimately acquainted with every detail of the history of the Caravels, the special mission assigned to me by the Spanish government to repeat the voyage of Columbus in the Santa Maria and the many ways in which the voyage has been described make my position the more difficult. The history and the serious representation of that great enterprise, you must admit, are very different from the many descriptions of fancy that have been written on the subject. You all know the history of the Caravels of Columbus. You have heard of his troubles and difficulties, which have grown with the last 400 years. But history, as recorded by Navarrete, whom the great Humboldt calls the father of history, says that Spain then approved generally the project, although while the conquest of Granada was hanging in the balance, the government decided to undertake no new venture until that was settled. This delay doubtless caused Columbus great sorrow, as he was growing old, but his project was not rejected by Spain. The Duke of Medina Sidonia supported Columbus during 2 years. The other 2 years, Father Diego Deza, professor at Salamanca, afterward Archbishop of Seville, supported him, and he was always protected by the Marchioness of Moya, the best friend of the Queen, which proves that even if he had difficulties, he had high protectors to sympathize with and encourage him. The picture so often painted, depicting the learned men of the University of Salamanca scoffing at Columbus, conveys an erroneous idea, as the records of every meeting were kept and exist today, and nowhere can be found recorded any such action against Columbus. On the contrary, Salamanca was the scientific center of the world, and there the theory of the spherical form of the earth was sustained. Nothing is more worthy of mention, in a similar case a few years after, than when Copernicus, who was excommunicated by Rome because of his theory of the solar system, applied to that university, its learned doctors answered in this magnificent form. Read Nicolaus Copernicus. That is the best defense of that scientific center, which was for centuries the foremost in the world. You all know that Spain was consolidated by the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, sovereigns of Aragon and Castile. Portugal was almost a part of Spain, as the king had married the heiress of the throne of Spain, who unfortunately died without succession, a misfortune that will never be regretted enough by both nations. The only thing to be done by Ferdinand and Isabella to finish their great plan was to drive the Mohammedans from Granada. But that conquest was extremely difficult, as the cities when conquered were depopulated to be repopulated by the conquerors. The last bulwark of the Moors in Spain was so overpeopled by crowds ousted by the former conquests that there were millions of inhabitants disposed to fight to the last, as they had only the sea behind them. So strong was the struggle on both sides that Spain, instead of keeping its soldiers in camps, built before Granada the city of Santa Fe. King Ferdinand took his residence there, making the conquest paramount to all other business. Queen Isabella, going herself several times to bring supplies to the army, put all her attention in that war, and how is it possible that any serious historian could think that under such circumstances these sovereigns, being such great politicians, could support Columbus or any other venture, whatever might have been the sorrows of the man with whom the voyage was the only thought. The best proof that the voyage was not forgotten is that after Granada was surrendered on January 2, 1492, the capitulations were signed on April 30. On August 3, the ships sailed from Palos, and on October 12 of the same year, Spain opened to the New World the gates of history. And tell me when, before or since, in history have events gone so quickly? Tell me why, to your great Fulton, you delayed 22 years to grant him in August 1807 a patent to navigate his steamer only for 12 months? Could you tell me why, in the 19th century, the New York legislature was obliged to threaten with prison and fine anybody that should speak or act against Fulton? Tell me, where is his family, that I suppose are very rich, according to the service of that great countryman of yours? And when those who pity Columbus so much have answered satisfactorily, we shall consider the behavior of Spain toward Columbus and his descendants, who, after 400 years, you have seen yourselves so highly honored in this city of Chicago. As you know, the expedition of Columbus was prepared in Palos, and consisted of 3 ships. The largest was a vessel that was employed before in trading with Holland. She was called the Gallega, or the Galician. That name was changed to Santa Maria. The circumstance that she was chartered by the king, and that afterward, when wrecked on the coast of Santo Domingo, Spain paid for the whole ship and her equipment, has supplied much information about the Santa Maria, as all inventories and contracts made by the government exist in the archives at the present time. This permitted the new Santa Maria to be built to such a degree of exactitude that I consider at least 9/10 an exact reproduction of the original, which certainly could not be done with other historic ships of even more recent date. It is not possible to get the same data concerning the Pinta and the Nina, as they were in fact merchant ships that went on their owners' account. There is only a memorandum of the general line of the exterior form, gear, and sails, but that circumstance proves that Columbus found welcome and help in the opinion, since he was supported by regular merchants and sailors who willingly took a part in the enterprise not only with their persons but on their own account. These ships have been reproduced in Spain with the greatest exactitude by Lieutenant W. McCarthy Little of the United States Navy, and with the greatest skill and economy. The historical treasures which you can consult at the Convent of La Rabida in the exhibition show to the most incredulous that the spherical form of the earth was already accepted by every learned man in Europe. Even was it true to those mariners who navigated to the west as far as the Azores and Canary Islands, and it was especially so to the Portuguese, who had discovered those western islands of the group called Terceras. But only in Spain was that feeling strong and popular, a feeling that, although it was not called by the name of public opinion, as nowadays, directed the people of all nations with irresistible force. For that reason Columbus came to Spain. For that reason he was obliged to wait until Spain could undertake the voyage of discovery, and for that reason he found owners of ships and rich sailors who risked willingly life and property in the enterprise. Only ignorance can see miracles and wonders instead of the natural development of facts, science, navigation, astronomy, cartography, and preparatory voyages to Africa, the Canary and Azores Islands, and Iceland. All these made ripe the fruit of crossing the ocean toward the west, and the praise belongs to the tree where that fruit was most ripe. That tree was Spain, where Columbus brought the fortunate error of Toscanelli, believing the distance about 1/4 of what it is. He expected to arrive at Cathay. and so the discovery was made by Spain, and could not have been done by any other nation without committing Providence to historical injustice. But when we speak of La Rabida, allow me to tell you how much you are indebted to Mr. Curtis for that wonder. Let me call it a wonder, for the work could not have been better done. It is not a copy, it is the same, stone by stone, the original building of La Rabida. The great discovery was not appreciated in all its importance until 20 years after, when more and more new lands and great empires were explored, and the voyage of the Victoria, commanded by Sebastian Elcano, went around the world, and whose family yet use for a coat of arms a globe with a lem primus me circumdedisti. All that made us think what Spain had in her hand. In behalf of that opinion, I am going to quote the Probanza of 1513 and 1515, in the lawsuit against Diego Colon, son of the Admiral, Volume 3 of Navarrete, page 538, documents of my private library, but I offer them with pleasure to the members of the Congress who wish to consult them. Those probanzas, that today would be called inquests, were to clear up the particulars of the discovery, and there were heard more than 50 witnesses, some speaking of what they had seen, others of what they had heard from this same Columbus. Among other curious details, it is perfectly proved that Columbus contracted with Martin Alonso Pinzon, captain of the Pinta, to divide with him in equal parts honors and profits if they succeeded, which contract he afterward did not fulfill because it was not in writing. Let us forget and forgive the man, and always think of the hero. But I will finish to explain why there do not exist so many details of the Caravels Pinta and Nina as of the Santa Maria. This is because the smaller ships were in their owners' or captains' hands. They did not enter into the contracts and inventories of the admiral. The 3 vessels being ready, they sailed from Palos on August 3, arrived at the Canary Islands on August 9, and remained there until September 6, and did not sail from Gomera, an island south of Tenerife. The instruments that they used in navigation were similar to those you see on this table. The Astrolabe, well known in Spain since the 11th century. The Jacob staff, that instrument that proceeds from the Chaldeans. And I offer besides for your inspection these others, which are not copies, but real instruments that have been used at sea and that belong to the Spanish section of the exposition, and I am now to describe to you briefly the use of them. The description followed. The voyage of the Caravels was made by the parallel of 27 degrees through the trade winds that, as we know today, come more to the north in summer, in which season the voyage was undertaken. You know how the deviation of the compass was discovered by Columbus, and how skillfully he overcame the difficulty between his men, changing the card on the needle as much as was necessary to correct the difference. You know also the history of the mutiny, made conspicuous by many curious pictures, one of which you can see in La Rabida, where Columbus is menaced by poniards during his sleep. Read the magnificent inquests, numbers 15, 16, and 17, Diplomatic Collection, pages 565 to 567, where you will see that Columbus consulted Martin Pinzon about returning to Spain that night, and that Pinzon answered, "No, sir, God would never allow a fleet of such a great king to return, not only tonight, but not for a year." Page 566. To which Columbus answered, "Let you be the blessed of God." How could it be otherwise in a short voyage of 30 days, that the only thing that made them uneasy was the steadiness of the wind, since it is the only thing referred to in the admiral's log of the 22nd of September, when he says that he was very happy at having a headwind, as the sailors were uneasy at the steadiness of the direction of the wind. Neither was that of the greatest importance, as they had only 16 days of voyage. Land was sighted on October 12, and there we again meet the man Columbus. Land was seen by a sailor of the Caravel Pinta, called Rodrigo de Triana, at 2 o'clock in the night, but the admiral awarded to himself the prize, consisting of an amount of money and a pension for life, because he said he had seen a light at 10 o'clock. According to his own log, Thursday, October 11, they were sailing at the rate of 12 miles an hour, or 9 knots of the actual measure, and how on a stormy night was it possible that he could see a light 36 knots distant on a low sandy inland that scarcely could be seen from the deck at 5 or 6 knots on a clear day? Rodrigo de Triana abandoned Spain in despair and made himself a Mohammedan, and Columbus received the prize allowed to him who first saw land. Let us again forget the man, to admire always the hero of an idea. But if you would read the original letter of Columbus to the nurse of the Infanta Doña Juana, which you can see also in the exposition at La Rabida, you will see that Columbus himself, by his own handwriting, states that he had money enough, although he had been 5 years without paying anybody, and after that study you will be able to appreciate how much value there is in those ridiculous stories and paintings of chains and poniards of authors and artists who otherwise could not sell their works. I do not excuse Bobadilla, who was very tyrannical, even in those times, in all the nations of Europe. But all that exalts more and more the behavior of Ferdinand and Isabella, who forgot the man to re-establish immediately the hero, the great discoverer, in all his privileges as general governor and admiral of the lands he discovered. And even today, in the more cultured and more enlightened nation in the world, and under very similar circumstances, although we know what the Suez Canal is for navigation, and that in the time of Ferdinand and Isabella nobody knew what was discovered, yet even now Jules Lesseps has found 100 Bobadillas. How then can you wonder that Columbus should find one? And where are the Ferdinands and Isabellas of the 19th century to forget the man and only remember the hero of another idea that opened a thoroughfare for 600 millions of men? After that, tell me where is a nation in the world that should dare to throw the first stone at Spain of the 15th century? On that 12th of October, Columbus planted on this continent a flag in the first island discovered, quite like the one which I offer for your inspection. It was the distinguishing signal of his authority, the admiral's flag. The Pinzon brothers carried these others. These are the flags of the discovery, granted by the king to the enterprise, the true flags of America, planted on the shores by the captains of the Pinta and Nina. The usual pictures are not in accord with the historical truth, since the flags were similar to the flags you can see here, and there was no priest with the party on either of the caravels, although you always see one represented in the pictures of the landing of Columbus. A great day was the 12th of October, a day that placed the name of Columbus and the flag of Castile in the book of immortality, a great day that opened this immense continent to Europe, already threatened by reform under the weight of religious intolerance, a great day that one, when the gun of the Pinta proclaimed "Land," the cry answered from the tops of the Andes and the Rocky Mountains, "For the white man." The Spanish government, wishing to renew that memory, offered again to the wind the old flag of Castile and another Santa Maria, the facsimile of the caravel of Columbus. A kind Providence has permitted me to complete such a historical voyage and to cross the Atlantic in 36 days, the same time that the great admiral employed in crossing it, and after reaching the island where was the first European settlement, and after, at Havana, Saluting the tomb where are the remains of that great hero of science and perseverance, I have brought the memory of his immortal spirit and the order of all Spain to wish from the high deck of the Santa Maria peace and prosperity to all the countries of the New World. End of section 25.